Hi, so I think we'll make a start. There's still a couple of people joining, but they can catch up. So welcome to the seminar, Creating and Capturing Value from a Circular Economy. This is the second in a series of NICER programme seminars introducing some of the key cross-cutting areas of importance to accelerating and scaling the circular economy. My name is Fiona Charnley, and alongside Professor Peter Hopkinson, who is also here today, we are co-directors of the Circular Economy Hub. This webinar is delivered in collaboration with Oakdene, Hollins and Innovate UK, and we have a fantastic lineup of speakers to introduce you to. But before we start, I wanted to go over some points of housekeeping. So we are recording this event, and it will be made available via the CE Hub website after the event. But if you don't wish to be included within the recording, please keep your cameras off. If you could please keep your microphones on mute for the duration of the event. Please add any questions that you wish to ask to our speakers in the chat box during their presentations, and there will be time for Q&A and discussion at the end of the presentations, but also towards the end of the event, we are going to break out into a workshop style session where obviously you can come off your microphones, and we would love to hear from you. So as a bit of background to begin with, for those of you who don't already know, the National Interdisciplinary Circular Economy Research Programme is the largest UKRI investment to date, focusing on accelerating and upscaling circular economy research and innovation. The £30 million investment is split across 5 national interdisciplinary circular economy research centres, each of which focuses on a particular resource flow, and also an integrating circular economy hub, which coordinates, scales and adds value to the programme as a whole. The programme also includes £2.5 million worth of Innovate UK funding, focusing on SME research and development, and a call for that funding has recently been announced. And so many of you might be involved in submitting applications to that. Importantly, the programme is supported by all research councils and has significant involvement from the policy community, including DEFRA, BEIS and other devolved administrations. And we're going to hear from a speaker from BEIS later on today. The 4-year programme was launched in January this year, and it brings together academics, industrialists, policymakers and wider society with a key aim of accelerating and upscaling the UK's transition towards a more circular and regenerative economy. So we've got quite a packed agenda today. Obviously, myself and Peter welcoming you this afternoon, and we're going to give a brief introduction into the topic of value related to circular economy. I'm then going to hand over to colleagues at Oakdene, Hollins, the KTN and Innovate UK, who are leading a study on UK value retention and are going to share some early insights from that study with us. We'll then be hearing from Stephen LaRue from BEIS on industrial decarbonisation, innovation and value retention and what that means to industrial strategy. And I'm then delighted to be able to introduce a number of industrial representatives who are going to talk about value retention from the perspectives of their own sectors and value chains. So we have Richard Loretto joining us from Amazon Europe, James Barry joining us from Renewable Parts Limited, and Catriona Corey from Topolytics. We're then going to break into, as I mentioned, a workshop session where we're going to explore these value chains in a bit more detail in relation to the value retention strategies that will have been introduced. And then we will wrap up just after 4, and the session will close by 4:30. So really just to set the context a bit for why value is so important. The circular economy, as you'll know, is a systems framework that enables the creation of value at different scales through the use of different value creation and value retention strategies. And within our current linear system, a material or a component, a product or resource flow is at its most valuable at the point of conception, and it then typically decreases in value quickly throughout its linear life cycle, after which it's disposed of. Within a circular economy, however, value is created and then retained through an ecosystem of stakeholders across and between different value chains again and again through processes such as reuse, refurbishment, remanufacture and recycling. And feedback is an essential part of this framework. And that's demonstrated by the multiple loops of value creation that you can see on this slide. And that feedback can take multiple forms, including data and knowledge exchange. So the circular economy is therefore built on an ecosystem of relationships that are nurtured to retain value, as opposed to one-off transactions through which value depreciates. And when we talk about value, as many of us often do, there are many different forms of value creation. And within a circular economy, these can be divided into tangible or explicit value, the most obvious form being economic value, but others can also record resource, people, data, and knowledge value as well. And also more sort of the less touched upon intangible or implicit value, which are often more difficult to quantify, but we've seen that they tend to be a common part of circularity. So these could include, for example, increases in stability of an organisation, control or resilience, brand reputation, social impact, and behaviour change. And there are several models that have been developed that have tried to represent the different opportunities for value creation within a circular economy. And these are often referred to as circular strategies or value retention processes. And these underpin different types of circular business models, which we're all becoming more familiar with. So as shown on the left-hand side of this slide, strategies can be largely grouped into three key categories. So first of all, those that create value from optimizing future inputs, for example, new materials that enable regenerative cycles, bio-based materials, for example. The second category is creating and retaining value through extending the use phase of a product or material through processes such as remanufacture or building a better understanding of product health and refurbishment. And then finally, retaining value from post-use legacy products and materials through, for example, symbiosis, where the output of one value chain is captured as input into another. And these different strategies then inform different types of business models on the right-hand side of this slide, where value can be created and retained at different stages of a product life cycle over and over again. And at the University of Exeter, we run a global online masterclass in circular economy implementation, through which we take individuals from multiple organisations through a 6-step process of value creation. And over 1,000 participants have now taken part in this 6-week online course. Some of the companies that have taken the course include Google, Microsoft, Philips, but also a lot of startups and SMEs. And from this experience, we've been able to gain a really in-depth understanding of some of the most prominent challenges facing organisations when transitioning towards a circular economy. And some of the key challenges that come up time and time again are how to develop a consistent framework across the organisation to enable the creation of new value, and how to make the business case to initiate and scale up circular innovation, and how to actually measure that value and how to measure progress towards the transition. So in today's workshop, it is intended that we'll further explore the area of value creation and retention from a circular economy from a number of different perspectives. And I'd now like to hand over to Rachel Waugh and David Parker from Oakdene, Hollins, and Abishek Ramesh from Innovate UK, who have been undertaking an extensive study on value retention within a UK context across a number of different sectors to gain a better understanding of the opportunity it presents for the UK. So I will stop sharing my screen, and Rachel and David, I'll hand over to you.
Okay, while Rachel is starting that up. Oh, that was quicker than I expected. Thank you very much, Fiona, and to the rest of the team at Circular Economy Hub for sort of wholeheartedly getting stuck into this to for what we see as a very key step into the next phase of implementation of the findings of this study and turning into positive action. So this is part of the journey, part of getting the CE hubs involved in getting their constituents up to speed. So we're delighted that you're all here today. So what we're going to do is briefly overview a project that we're engaged in currently. It's going to finish about mid-January, so there's some preliminary results here into value retention processes, i.e. keeping these products in service by any number of means. And it's sponsored by Innovate UK, for which we thank them for their funding and faith in us. Thank you very much, Abishek. So let me, along with our partnership with KTN and the University of Brighton, knowledge transfer network you'll be familiar with, I hope. Okay, should we move on? Okay, so a brief overview of the today's agenda as far as we're concerned. I should be doing the first half, and then my colleague Rachel will be doing the second half. But first of all, let me introduce you to Abishek Ramesh from Innovate UK. He's the lead technologist in charge of this area. Well, indeed, the project manager from the Innovate UK perspective, shepherding our efforts. Over to you, Abishek.
Thank you, David. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So yeah, like David introduced, I'm Abishek. I work within the manufacturing and materials sector team at Innovate UK. I'm one of the innovation leads working in this team. Next slide, please. So I'm sure most of you know who Innovate UK are, but in case if you're not aware, I just wanted to do the standard introduction. We are UK's innovation agency, and we are part of UKRI, and we are a non-departmental public body. Innovate UK, we are also an integral part of the UK's innovation ecosystem, and we play a key role in delivering UK government's objectives that are outlined in the industrial strategy and innovation strategy and various other sort of research and technology related initiatives. Innovate UK, we deliver a range of research and innovation support. So it's not just about grant funding, but there's various other programs as well. For example, access to investors, facilitating research partnerships, both in a domestic and in an international environment, in order to accelerate innovation and to drive business investments into research and development. So we're not just a sort of grant funding body, we do more than that. And our support is available to UK businesses and researchers of all sizes and from all sectors. So yeah, that's who we are. And next slide, please. Right. So before David and others give you a more detailed insight into the results of the study and what they've been looking at, I just wanted to set some context and explain why this topic, value retention, is sort of interesting and important to us. So the manufacturing and materials team at Innovate UK, over the past couple of months, we've been very busy carrying out some detailed analysis and engaging with a range of business, government and academic stakeholders in order to develop a future vision, or you might want to call it an innovation strategy, looking at the sort of future of the UK industrial sectors from an innovation lens. And through this ongoing work, it's quite clear that the necessity to hit the net zero goals and to sort of build a global Britain in a post-Brexit and post-COVID world. So those are undeniably our sort of short-term priorities for the UK industries. So we also started looking at the medium to long-term priorities, innovation priorities for the UK industries. And our vision is to enable the UK manufacturing industries to grow and successfully transition towards a more sustainable, resilient and a thriving economy. And we want to achieve this through strategic investment in innovations. So if you look at this picture, so there's lots of detail that sits behind this picture, but I'm not going to go into all those details. But if I have to sort of summarize the work that the team is currently doing, so at the top you see the goals, which are G1, G2, G3. So like I said, net zero, resource efficient industries, competitive, thriving, and all that good stuff. When we looked at the sort of key innovation capabilities that we wanted to enable for the future, there were some major clusters or major families that we identified. Those are listed on the left-hand side as a C1, C2, C3, C4, and 5. And C5 is where the value retention topic predominantly sits. And on the right-hand side, you see the enablers that are important for us to sort of achieve these capabilities, right? So when we looked at the problem space as part of this work, what we found was unsustainable extraction and consumption of resources, inefficiencies in design and production practices, and wasteful disposal of manufactured products and materials. So these are some of the major challenges or barriers that's stopping us from achieving the net zero goals. So one of the questions that we explored as part of this visioning work was, how can we design, manufacture, sell, and use products and services that will deliver more value across the life cycle to the customers and also to the broader society, but with less environmental impact? So that was one of the sort of exam questions that we're thinking about. And this is where we believe the value retention processes can play a major role in addressing these problems. So value retention processes, they sit primarily within the sort of C5 cluster that I mentioned earlier on this diagram. And also, yeah. So, but if also when you look at the other clusters, there are some common themes like resource efficiency, circularity, and digital are sort of the three most common solution themes that cuts across all those 5 sort of capability areas. And value retention processes such as remanufacturing, repair, through life engineering services, reuse, we believe they already generate a significant revenue to the UK economy, and it still has the opportunity to sort of grow well over 30 billion in sort of next 5 to 10 years. So this is based on some initial analysis and studies that were done, but we strongly believe there is a significant growth potential in this area. So hence we think there is a strong case for investment in innovations. So not just the technological innovations, but also innovations that need to address some of the societal barriers. So we think there is a strong case for investment in innovations that enable and enhance the value retention processes and the associated sectors. And by doing that, we definitely think there's a significant opportunity to reduce the CO2 footprint, and also there's an indirect impact in terms of increasing the national resilience by creating new industrial value chains and creating more sustainable supply chains. So yeah, from Innovate UK point of view, we definitely see the value retention processes and related activities and sectors and innovations as an important area for future innovation. Next slide, please. So I explained about our thinking. So how does our thinking align with the government strategies and other relevant activities? So those of you who have read the government's industrial decarbonisation strategy, if you look at the actions that I've highlighted here, so these are specifically mentioned in this government strategy document, and you can clearly see, the VRP activities, the value retention activities like remanufacturing, resource efficiency, reuse, repair, and all these sort of things are explicitly highlighted and mentioned in the industrial decarbonisation strategy, because the government thinks this is an important area for future of UK economy. And also, if you look at the innovation strategy that was published very recently, there are references to missions and technology families. There are 7 technology families identified as important areas for the UK. Manufacturing and materials is one of them. And again, there's quite a strong sort of emphasis on resource efficiency, and digital technologies and product innovation, business models, new business models, and all that good stuff. And the next thing that I wanted to point out is the 10 points plan. The 10 points plan, there's quite a lot of reference to sort of clean energy, decarbonization, clean mobility and sustainable building type stuff. But still, we're going to be, we want our manufacturers to play a key role in delivering the sort of sustainable design and make aspects of these plans. So there's still a very strong role for manufacturing industry to play in there. And we also been working very closely with our colleagues from BEIS and DEFRA policy teams over the last one and a half year, and KTN have been playing a key role in bringing different players together on this topic of value retention. And this is to make sure that our sort of thinking from innovation perspective is also aligned with the policy, the associated policy initiatives that the other parts of the government are thinking. So that's the work that we've been doing to make sure there's complete alignment with the sort of innovation and technology perspective and the policy perspective. And I think Stephen Leroux, who's speaking later, he'll talk a bit more about what's going on in the policy landscape. Next slide, please. Right, so this study that Fiona and David mentioned, so why did we want to do it? For Innovate UK to design an effective support program to enable the long-term circular industrial growth, we think there is still a need to assess the current state and better understand the scope and size of the UK value retention sectors. Some of the regional strengths and priorities is not well understood yet, and there is little socioeconomic evidence that is currently available on a national scale. So we really hope that this study, which Oakdene, KTN, and others are helping us with, we really hope that the evidence that we get from the study will be really crucial for the development of a meaningful innovation strategy and for us to help design an impactful innovation program. If you look at the scope of this work, I've sort of adapted this picture from Oakdene Hollins. Primary focus is around the sort of product value retention processes like remanufacturing, reuse, refurbishment, repair, and through life engineering services. But we've also included design as part of this scope of this work, because it's really important that we design products in the right way to sort of facilitate downstream value retention activities. So that's also in scope. And we also recognize the sort of difference between the product value retention activities and the material value retention activities. And you can't sort of ignore one or the other, and they both are equally important. But for the purpose of this study, the focus is more around the product value retention, and there are some aspects of material value retention that will be covered within the study. I've also listed some of the objectives here. So basically, we wanted to understand, what's UK's strategic position? What are we good at? Where are the future innovation needs associated to value retention processes? What are the market opportunities for us? What are the current barriers and opportunities from sort of socioeconomic and environmental point of view? And also this study, we wanted to get an understanding of international benchmarking, what other countries are doing from investment point of view and also from a policy perspective. And we wanted some insights in terms of the benefits analysis and potential recommendations for future interventions. So that's what we expect the study will deliver. And in terms of intended outcomes from this study, again, Innovate UK, we primarily do R&D funding programs, but that's not just what we are looking at doing. Like I mentioned earlier, we are working closely with other government departments like BASE and DEFRA, and we're looking at developing some joint strategies around value retention processes and associated innovations. And we also want to sort of support scaling up of solutions. And this is through both public investment, and also we want to make sure that the private sector is also investing into these sort of innovations. And we would like to sort of facilitate greater engagement between the researchers, industry, and policymakers, and also the investment community. And the other expected outcome is to foster cross-sector collaboration, because some sectors are really good at adopting some of these innovation practices, and we want to sort of foster that cross-sectoral collaboration and knowledge exchange. So that's where people like KTN and others can play a great role. And we also want to encourage more circular design practices and new business models through the programs that we deliver in the future. And last thing, we mainly want to address some of the barriers to adoption, because at the end of the day, it's really important that industry and researchers they all adopt these innovations. So these are some of the intended outcomes that we hope that this study will help us achieve. And I hope it gave you a good overview of what we are thinking and why we think this is an important area of research and innovation. And I'm sure the other speakers later today will give you a bit more insights into what the initial findings are. And again, like I said, Stephen will give you a bit more policy perspective on this topic. So thank you everyone, and that's it from me. Over to you, David.
Okay, thanks, Abby. Okay, let's launch into the meat of the content. So some of this presentation has been adapted from elsewhere, and it has a sort of PR purpose, I suppose. So here's our PR purpose. So Rachel, if you just sort of click through. So what we're saying is, if you saw something that delivered these things, I know there's some questions in the been coming up already around CRMs, preservation of those, keeping those in use, and the effect on the social side of things, jobs, skills, etc., and resilience. So reshoring as a component of that, and net overall GWP, some of the global and national benefits that might accrue from this. Would you be interested in a suite of tactics that delivered this? So and had a tangible impact on net zero, as we have found in our studies elsewhere. So would you be interested in that? If so, yes, value retention process is for you. Read on, you're in the right presentation. Okay, thanks, Rachel. So what's our study about? It is about these value retention processes, which there's more granularity, I suppose, than just talking about remanufacturing. So we can either use things directly, arrange direct reuse at the bottom of this diagram, and we can keep things in use up to what we might call their expected life. So we typically use the tactics of repair and to some extent refurbishment to just tickle things along to make sure we got the full use out of them. And of course, arranging direct reuse, a number of websites available for your use to hand off your stuff to make sure it gets reused, and very valuable activities they are as well. And of course, Amazon there with their resellers, etc., etc. So very glad they're along today. So getting the maximum out of the first life, and then the top half of this diagram, giving stuff a new life. So a new life equivalent to the first life. And that is what hardcore remanufacturing is all about. Taking this stuff back, retrieving it, staying in contact with whoever's using it to maximize the efficiency of that process, putting it through validated services, and then giving it a new life as per the original mechanism, or perhaps even better. So that's the core of it. So you have things that just maximize the current life, and then once they've reached the end of that life, let's try and give them a new life. So both those elements are under investigation here. So you see, it has impacts on directly on the amount of virgin material that's required. So you know, a lot of the approaches up to now have been based on recycling. The trouble with recycling is it reduces everything to very much an elemental level, and you have to do you lose a lot of the investment there, and then you have to put in a lot of energy to bring it back up again. So keeping things as products in effect helps you retain 80–90% of the material and 80–90% of the carbon burden that already went in. So you can get an as new product for maybe 10 or 20% of the energy GWP investment that you put in the first place. So that's the bottom line. That's where it's going. And then all the other benefits flow from that. Putting in those systems that support that, putting in the jobs and skills that support that, and fostering sort of clusters of businesses that support each other, especially in the complex industries like aerospace, automotive, etc., etc. So which sectors did we look at, or are we looking at? Now, we picked these 10 sectors because they account for about 70%-ish of all the potential remanufacturing and repair and reuse and stuff that's going on. And they are sort of panning out to be the approximate 10 that are being looked at in studies time after time. So we can establish a degree of consistency across our different projects and examinations. We've gone for these. So we have some fair understanding of what's going on in these sectors. The source of this diagram is, so if anybody's really interested in getting going the real meat, the engineering meat of this, I recommend looking at this UNET report. Nabil Nazir in the States with his band of merry men have done a fantastic job to really pull back the curtain on what's going on behind the scenes and quantify some of these both business benefits and material energy benefits. Thank you, Rachel. So yeah, we've heard a lot about recycling. So here's the bottom line really on recycling. If we take something like an iPhone and then just stick it back as material value, we end up just retrieving a fraction of a percent of the value that or the price that you pay as a consumer. Whereas if we can reuse, refurbish, remanufacture, Apple approved, etc., etc., an iPhone, we can recover half that value back again. So that's what we mean by value retention. And that reflects, of course, the amount of extra resource you have to put in to crank that product back up to a new product. So material recovery, recycling, you're starting again. And if you're reusing, you've got a pretty good platform to start from. Thank you, Rachel. So as Abishek was saying, there's a lot going on here. We're not going to go into this in detail, but every man and his dog now is interested in these topics areas, not least because of the net zero strategy, which is sort of our sort of headline metric, I suppose, for pretty much everything that's going on. And fortunately, this plays very well into that agenda, but there are a huge number of initiatives going on, not least from the at the UK government level, but also, I think, next slide, at the national level, the UK nation, devolved nation level. So some excellent work coming out of Wales, you know, not least with their latest sort of circular economy beyond recycling efforts. So the Beyond Recycling Strategy and Indicators is a very recent document, but it builds on their already impressive recycling program. So it is their declared ambition to up their game, move away from recycling and move into products. Thank you very much. And of course, the Scottish as well. So some very coordinated activities in those devolved nations, a bit more fragmented in the English regions, of course, because you know, basically the size of it, you know, Wales is equivalent to a large local authority, so it's a darn sight easier to get a coherent approach together. But anyway, a lot of material there. You're sure you'll be getting these slides later, so you can take away and look at them. Thank you, Rachel. So we recognise in this study that there are things we can learn from other people. So there are a number of headline studies that have been conducted, or at least partial studies that we've looked at. So some work I was referred to, Nabil Nazir and his men at Rochester Institute of Technology. So they've assessed what's going on in the United States and identified these sorts of barriers, and also implemented the policies indicated. Again, please take this away and look at it, use it as background for your future education. But there are, you know, as I'm saying, we ourselves have been looking in some of these areas. So we've looked at Canada and come up with some quite concrete recommendations actually for the Canadians and provinces to start addressing headline opportunities. And we'll come on to that a little bit later, I think, when we get into the workshop type aspect. And similarly, at the EU level, we've been engaged in doing a sort of pan-European evaluation. And so we are pretty confident that we know where the problems are in these supply chains, in the businesses, and the barriers, maybe not so much at the technology level, which is the focus of the work we're engaged in at the moment, but certainly on the policy and financial side, we're pretty much up to speed with that. And we suggest that is not the focus of today's topic. But again, we'll come on to that later. The really interesting one is what's happening in China, because as you know, they're always into 5-year plans, rolling through their programs, and there is some excellent framework activity going on there, the way they partition their approach to, in effect, mapping it onto the circular economy. So there's quite a lot to learn from places like China. And of course, if they start to adopt remanufacturing and going down this route, then yeah, you can see we're going to get steamrolled by them again. Brilliant. Okay, thank you, Rachel. So this table, and again, a lot of detail, but there's a lot of activity going on that's been coordinated and tried to pull together in a very short time. But here we've just tried to summarize the state of play about what's happening within various aspects of the VRP spectrum, and with some indication of the confidence with which we know these numbers. So as I say, all the 10 sectors that we looked at down the left-hand side, and then mapping across. And as you get many of these activities do not happen within the recorded scope of national statistics. So there's no repair code, there's no remanufacturing code, for example, in national statistics. So all those aspects will have to be done by survey work and have been done by survey work, including refurbishment. When you get to repair stroke refurbishment, it's a bit of a grey area because some sectors do have repair codes, others don't. And then indeed, repair might embrace everything up to remanufacturing. And reuse is very poorly handled. What's the only statistic I can think of is garages and used car sales is probably the only statistic that's routinely collected on reuse, but certainly very tricky to get hold of what's happening in the consumer to consumer domain, which is probably where quite a lot of informal exchange occurs, and notwithstanding what might be happening in the business to consumer. So that's a great opportunity area for repair, reuse, refurbishment certainly in the business to consumer sphere. But that's the sort of framing of what we're finding, and we'll be refining this as we go through. Okay, Rachel. Okay, again, we're trying to summarize a lot of information in a very short time, but later we'll be picking out some elements of this diagram. But you will see as you go through it, when you look at the business to consumer areas, there's usually a very distinct difference when you look at the barriers from what's happening in the business to business domain. So you can imagine a lot of formal contractual stuff. It's very clear what you're getting. It's very clear who your customers are. It's very clear how you can get stuff back again. When it gets to business to consumers, it's sort of one to many, or at best one to millions, even perhaps if you're Amazon. So the issues involved in closing those loops become much more apparent in that dimension of barriers. But there are a lot of commonalities as well. There are a lot of things around skills. There's a lot of things around how do you create level playing fields with what you might call cheap imports or copy parts or whatever. So again, this is all, I think, rising to the fore with the carbon agenda, because now people are talking about pricing of carbon. So where you might have been able to get away with quite cheap processing or perhaps even slack standards, then this is going to start to play out in the international agreements. And not least, because this is the focus of this project, a whole load of technical issues around understanding products, and especially if they're products that you haven't made yourself, so you're a third party who's trying to do these activities. Where do you get access to the information? Issues of digital twinning, understanding materials, composition, history, and software and systems to track where stuff is, what it's been through, and what you might do with it in future. So a lot of interesting opportunities, perceived as barriers, but hopefully they're opportunities coming in from along these dimensions. And I think we'll pick up on some of these later, won't we? So again, there's the flip side of those. You will see if you're sort of glancing over these things that might come into play on the technical side. So certainly modular design, that keeps coming up. Material passports, and perhaps being a much more feasible solution than it might have been in the past with the evolution of digital technologies, blockchain, all these sorts of things. So again, across different sectors, we're seeing the mandatory material passports as one common theme. There are others. And then on the economic side, perhaps from a business dimension rather than a technical dimension, looking at value retention through servitization. So companies like Volvo moving heavily into this sphere, and perhaps all their stuff will be delivered through service models. You You won't be able to buy Volvo cars within 5 years. It will all be delivered through service. And including all the add-on services you might get, upgrading your software, installing new apps, and getting it valet, and all sorts of stuff. And in particular, pulling through the use of procurement, being a demanding customer to demand these low impact. So all these reuse products will come with substantially reduced scope 3 impacts. And that should be a major selling point and a major benefit to, well, us all really. So there's a huge opportunity for smart purchasing, which the world should recognise. So very glad about that. On the social side, we talked about the upskilling. There was a question around social benefits. This is one of them, notwithstanding the fact that all the impacts of all the products are going to go down through every impact in the life cycle inventory. And legislative scope 3 reporting is a sort of an underpinning mechanism for carbon reporting, which again plays into this space. Thank you, Rachel. Is that over to you now, Rachel?
Yeah. So just picking up on what David was saying, we've been focusing in on some of the innovation opportunities that are arising associated around value retention processes. And there are opportunities for innovation in a range of spaces, be that policy, business models, technical processes and design. Some of the innovation opportunities that we have drawn out from our stakeholder engagement, we have highlighted here, and some of them have a very distinct technology focus, and so it's Innovate UK, as Abishek was mentioning, has a particular interest in perhaps some of these innovation opportunities. So we'd really encourage you in the workshop session to be digging further into other ideas and thoughts around where there may be opportunities for innovation, and also what mechanisms might be appropriate to support the development of these innovations. I'm actually on the last slide now. So in terms of sort of summarising where we've got to, I think David gave a very good overview there in terms of particularly around the barriers and opportunities. So we see that some of the barriers around value retention are associated with the technical complexity and the increasing technical complexity of some of the key products that are remanufacturing. We think about the automotive sector, for example, which has gone from a predominantly mechanical based product to an electromechanical product. So there's an increased complexity and challenges around remanufacturing there. Also, the economic squeeze. We have new products that are coming in at lower prices, and we also have increasing quality coming in from some of those lower cost imports. So some of the value retention activities, particularly remanufacturing, have been experiencing a bit of a squeeze. Conversely, we have these opportunities to consider the whole life value, and that encourages us to think about traceability, about new service-based business models, about capturing emissions. And we also see that the UK policy context is very much evolving to be supportive of value retention activities. We've been putting together our initial bottom-up estimates of the market, coming in at around 27 billion. To be further validated and verified going forwards, but we've also identified a number of innovation opportunities around technologies, business models and design that we can explore. Just keeping an eye on the time, so I'm going to wrap up here, but very much hoping to continue the discussions during the workshop sessions. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much, Abishek, Rachel and David. Really interesting study, and there's been, it's inspired quite a lot of chat or discussion. One of the questions that's being discussed is the inclusion or not of the built environment. So I was wondering if you could perhaps respond to that.
At the moment, the study does not include the built environment aspects. We are aware that there are particular sectors where this activity is increasing. We know, for example, there's a lot of academic research going on into the remanufacturing of building elements, for example, over in the Netherlands. But historically, most of the studies and data have focused on the 10 sectors that we've drawn out here. So for this study, we've focused on some of those more mechanical components and products.
Great, thank you. And it's my understanding that where you are with the study is these are just initial findings, and the study's still ongoing, so people will have the opportunity to potentially feed into the study, and that's the purpose of the workshop this afternoon. So Rachel and David and Abishek will be joining us for this afternoon's workshop, so if you do have any points that you wish to raise or questions or additional areas to explore, then please do save them up for the workshops.